Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. The story of America is the story of when everyday people decide to push back on tyranny. It's easy to hold our founders up in awe that they're somehow unrelatable giants of history, people very different from us. But the truth is, they were regular people, farmers, tradesmen, sailors, teachers, and yes, regular moms and dads. The point is that these colonists were just people. They wanted to live their lives, raise their kids, pursue happiness, and be left alone. But at a certain point, tyranny, as it often does, comes to your door and comes after your family. Tyranny is the natural state of all governments throughout all of history. And when the tyranny of Britain and King George, when they pushed these colonists' backs against the wall, when the everyday people could endure it no longer, they did the unthinkable. What many of them probably did not want to. They took a stand. First, you had the Minutemen come out, right? They were the civilian colonists. They independently formed militia companies, and they were self-trained in weaponry, which is where the well-regulated, by the way, comes from, tactics and military strategies, comprising the American colonial partisan militia during the American Revolutionary War. And they were known for being ready at a minute's notice, thus the name Minutemen. Now, these Minutemen provided a highly mobile, rapidly deployed force that enabled the colonies to respond immediately to war threats, any kind of threats. But at the end of the day, these Minutemen were just commoners, everyday people. Well, there's the new Minutemen force in America. I said this during the days of the Tea Party, and I see it now coming back again a decade later. Moms and dads, again. And much like the original Minutemen, they didn't want to fight. They just wanted to be left alone. But unfortunately, these Minute moms and dads, they have seen the face of tyranny, not from a foreign power, but from a domestic one here in the United States, and they've had enough. The reason is simple. This time, the threat of tyranny, it's the threat that's coming for their kids. Parents are waking up across the country to a school system completely taken over and dominated by very far left Democrat-dominated unions led by people, I don't know, like the likes of Randy Weingarten of the American Federation of Teachers. These teachers' unions are radicalized, sold out completely to the Democrat Party, just look at the donations, and in total control of public schools in America, which means local school boards are beholden to these activist unions rather than who they should be responsive to, the parents. All of this explains why critical race theory, radical sexual ideologies, and now the whole masking and the mandatory vaccine, why all of that is either being discussed about being imposed on children or imposed on children without any regard at all to what parents think or believe. You have a school board, for instance, headlines this week, suing a parent for crying out loud because they were asking questions. Do the teachers' unions and school boards really believe moms and dads were just going to sit there and let all of this happen? Maybe parents would have put up with all of this stupidity at their work, but at their school, when it's their kids that are on the line? No way. And so what we see, explosions of frustration across the country. This time it happened in Williamson County, Tennessee. Watch.
Will not comply! 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 No more masks! No more masks! Child abusers! You are child abusers! There's a place for you guys! There's a bad place in hell! And everybody's taking notes, buddy! Keep that little smug.
We know who you are.
We know who you are.
You can leave freely, but we will find you, and we know
You will
who you
never
are.
be allowed in
We
public
know who you
again.
are.
You will never be allowed.
I know
You'll never
who you
let it be
are.
allowed in public
I know
again.
who you are. I know who you are. Let him out. Let's let him out.
Now, to be clear and consistent, I've never, nor has anyone that I know, ever condoned any kind of violence or physical assault or anything that is not protected speech. We have never condoned that as being a protected form of protest. I've protested many a time over the past many years, and we believe in peaceful protest. I believe in peaceful protest. That said, a couple of things should be noted. First, this did not typify the behavior by the Tennessee parents at the school board meeting, not at all. I mean, it was passionate, understandably so, and deservedly so, but this was just a couple of parents, a couple of people at the event. Yet national media only circulates this one video as if this is what the entire event was like. Here's a bit of video that shows you what the event was really like. Watch.
The thing that really bothers me about this is the people who don't want masks aren't saying we want masks banned. Everyone's saying, hey, if you want to wear a mask, you do you. I don't want to wear one. You can't muzzle me. And no one has the authority to be making these. Certainly not a school board. We're all out here fighting for personal choice. That's right. Vaccines, this is going to be settled in court.
They can't vote against the majority. They're working for us, and they'll be canned.
Everybody here knows they don't work, know that it's unconstitutional, know that it's illegal, and the school board is violating their authority given to them by the legislature.
Yeah, they're not a body of lawmakers. National media is not going to show you any of these parents, though. The reason that parents are up in arms in Tennessee is that they're overwhelmingly anti-masks for kids. They were fine with it last year to an extent, but they want them off now, particularly because they understand the disease, this virus, so much better now. And again, healthy kids are not at risk, despite all of the hype in the media about the Delta variant. And if you disagree with me, you're anti-science. And I'm not saying that to be joking. So far, just over 400 children under the age of 18 when you're looking at the coronavirus and you're looking at the CDC, don't take numbers from the CDC, because Wall Street Journal and Johns Hopkins have gone through and looked at all of that. And when they went through it, they noticed that all of these children had secondary conditions, right? You have more children that are dying every flu season, and we haven't masked kids for the flu. But parents have had it, because people aren't following the science when they're putting these policies down, and they want their kids to breathe, right? And more than that, they want to have the right to make this choice for their kids themselves. If another parent wants to mask their child, so be it. And most of all, they want their school boards to listen to them. But these Democrat-dominated unions and these school boards don't care about facts or science, or more importantly, what the parents think. They've instead decided that they get to impose their radical ideas on parents and kids. And it would be one thing if the reasoning was scientific and logical, but it's fear-driven. Take a look at this video of an Oklahoma school board member saying that a child who is not wearing a mask could murder someone. Enraging.
It's just not okay for kids to commit murder by coming to school without a mask. And when it comes down to it, it's possible. They will cause a death of another child because they come to school without a mask.
This woman is absolutely hysterical, anti-science, and illogical, and she should not be sitting in a school board, much less within 200 yards of a school. This is not someone who follows science. It's a neurotic adult who doesn't care anything about kids. And this is what is giving rise to these minute moms and these dads. Not only are they taking on their school boards, but they're beginning to pull their kids out of public schools across the country. Take a look at this statistic. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, at least 5 million parents in the United States have decided to homeschool. This is up from 3.2 million in early 2020. Now, like I said, parents might put up with some DEI lecture about their quote-unquote white privilege at their corporation. They may watch riots on the television by Marxist organizations like BLM and shake their head and get on with their day. And they might watch the CDC lie or flip-flop back and forth and on the coronavirus. And some might even get the vaccine, their choice, even against their choice to get it or not to get it, just to ensure that they can bring home a paycheck to take care of their family if they're forced to by work. But come after the kids with this stuff? Yeah, no, the teachers' unions and school boards are making a serious miscalculation. So what's happening now are grassroots, parent-led organizations. They're coming together, much like in the original Tea Party days, growing like wildfire across the country. This is the most common ground issue in the country. Coalitions of parents that are multi-ethnic and party agnostic. But they all share one thing in common. They're not going to have their kids terrorized by teachers unions and school boards who don't care what they think, nor do they follow science with masks. But back to Williamson County, Tennessee, it's important to point out that the school board had allegedly already made up their minds before the meeting to reinstitute masks for elementary school children. So parents knew that the board had already made their decision on masking their kids. That was why they were so frustrated in the beginning. Not only that, though, Williamson County School Board started talking very assumptively about how all of the kids will be getting vaccinated and then the masks can come off. And if this school board thought parents were mad about the masks, well, they haven't seen anything yet. Vaccinating little kids for a virus that is virtually zero threat to them, according to all of the science. I know many parents that will never vaccinate their kids, at least not until there's far more understood about these new vaccines. Here's Dan Cash, one of the few sane Williamson County board members, pointing out how crazy the assumptions about vaccinating children are. Watch.
Everybody's talking about the age group and waiting for them to get vaccinated. What makes anyone on this board think parents are going to go out and vaccinate children in elementary school?
Exactly. Board member Dan Cash is simply pointing out the elephant in the room, that many moms and dads are just not going to allow their kids to be vaccinated. Vaccinated assumes and intimates inoculation. And yet we've heard from the CDC's own Rochelle Walensky that this is not so much an inoculation as it is simply a management of the severity of symptoms. Well, that sounds like a therapeutic, not a vaccination. Maybe we should use a different word. And if the school board's all talking like vaccinations in the offing for these kids, and then after the vax, they can remove their masks. Yeah, if they thought parents were mad about masks on their kids, do they really think that parents are going to be fine with having a brand new vaccine, one that they still have questions about, and one that's proven, at least this virus with kids? Kids are not driving the transmission rate, nor are school super spreader hubs. I mean, what do they think? Do you think parents weren't going to get angry? This is not over the top. I mean, I think you're going to see a mass walkout of these schools. Parents are just not going to do it, period. Williamson County schools, it should be noted, they're also bringing critical race theory now via a DEI consultancy. And if they thought the parents were mad about masks, Katie barred the door, y'all. I haven't seen nothing yet. Masks, new vaccines that no one can ask questions about that are really kind of therapeutics, Marxist ideologies imposed on the kids whose parents haven't approved of any of this and will not consent. Yeah, there was a tyrannical package of policies that the Democrat Party thought they could just impose on America after President Biden assumed the White House following the election and the controversy preceding it. The problem is that now the rubber's meeting the road as these policies are being forced onto their kids. Parents are they're not going to have their boys told that they can be girls or vice versa. They're not going to have their kids told that their kids are oppressors, that they're oppressors by virtue of something they can't control, skin color. And they're not going to have their kids masked and then demand that they be injected with a new vaccine that we're still discovering the efficacy of. So if you've pushed America's parents off the sidelines, well, you finally pushed them into the fight. Well done, teachers' unions and school boards. You just radicalized an entire militia of minute moms and dads. And you thought the Minutemen fought hard for freedom from tyranny the first time. Wouldn't you see what happens when you make moms mad? People who don't want to get involved in the fight, when they get involved in the fight, you're going to wish they hadn't been. The reaction is going to make what happened to, Leonardo DiCaprio's character in The Revenant look like a picnic in the forest. So remember that grizzly bear, that mama grizzly bear, and what she did when she thought her cubs were threatened? It wasn't pretty. The most dangerous place in the world is between a parent and their child. I got a word for parents, though, who are ready to join the fight. It's going to cost you, just as it cost the original Minutemen. Freedom is responsibility. A republic demands your civic participation. It requires it. We fell asleep. And here you have all of this garbage that came right into our communities. Marxism decided to go after our kids because we never did anything about it before. Well, some of us didn't. And because honestly, people believed in their fellow man, I think believed in their institutions. Now we're getting a wake-up call with all of this. And we're actually in another revolution right now. This is all of the debate and arguing and exchange of ideas that precedes other things that can happen. But this is a new revolution that the United States is in. And if we're going to win, and we're going to win because we're everyday parents, just like those everyday Minutemen that won their freedom the first time from an oppressive British regime that stopped representing its people, just like these school boards have stopped representing their communities. But look, be ready. Freedom's not cheap. You're going to pay a price. You're going to pay with your time, your emotion, long hours of effort. And sometimes you'll wonder if it's worth it. But freedom is worth it, especially for our kids. And fighting for our kids, it's definitely worth it. No one else is going to do this fight for us. Don't wait for the Republican Party. If you won't pick up some boxing gloves, rhetorically speaking, and fight for your kids, who else will? It's part of parenting. And we got to get in the battle ourselves. Remember, it was the everyday people that freed America the first time. And it will have to be everyday people that do it again. The minute moms and dads. So lay down the lives of leisure and distraction and be willing to put yourself on the line for kids and country. Phone bank. Raise money. Go door to door. Canvass. And make sure you get out the vote. Get people registered. Run for school board. Because these people that have decided to use our kids as political experiments, I haven't seen anything yet. And everyday people, you just now got them into the fight. So coming up, we continue this conversation with one everyday mom who's on the front lines of the school board fight in Williamson County, Tennessee. Robin Steenman of Moms for Liberty joins us next. Keep it here. Black Rifle Coffee Company is a veteran-owned coffee company serving premium coffee to people who love America. Veteran CEO and founder Evan Hafer spent over 7 years on the ground overseas with U.S. Special Forces and as a CIA contractor. Black Rifle Coffee is committed to Evan's mission of supporting veteran, law enforcement, and first responder causes. This summer, Black Rifle Coffee Company invites you to enjoy your coffee, whether you're brewing the perfect cup of pour over or cracking open a can of 300 on your next backcountry mission. Black Rifle Coffee is here to fuel your way wherever the summer takes you. So head on over to blackriflecoffee.com/DanaTV to order yours and use code DanaTV at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. Fuel your summer with America's coffee, Black Rifle Coffee. So as we discussed, parents are stepping up all over the country to fight back against these rogue school boards. Robin Steenman, she's joined us before. She's the chapter chair for Moms for Liberty in Williamson County, Tennessee. Yes, that's the county everybody's been seeing on TV. She joins me now to discuss what really went down at their school board meeting the other night. Robin, it's good to see you. Thank you for joining me. Before I get into that question, though, I have to ask you, this happened just shortly before we started for this program. Of course, the president, Joe Biden, was speaking out about masks and vaccines in schools and all of the other stuff. And he was asked about the video from Williamson County, Tennessee, the one that everybody's been talking about that's been getting conveniently the most airplay than all of the other nice peaceful stuff. Well, that one was peaceful too. My point is that the president said, he's basically said it was a shame. He was disturbed to watch the video of doctors and nurses, he said, being harassed in Tennessee after they left a school board meeting. I just wish that he would have spoken up for the kids, and the parents. I wanted to get your reaction to that, Robin. You're there in ground zero. What's your response to the president's reaction to this?
That's his priority. His task prioritization. His priority is to vilify the parents that are speaking out against this. Not that I condone bad behavior, but what should be addressed. The number one priority is the children and whether or not they should have to wear a mask for 8-9 hours a day.
What amazes me, Robin, and as I understand it, the school board had already made up their mind before you all even filed into the room to sit down and have a discussion about it. What is the point of these meetings with the school board if they're just going to make up their minds without parental influence?
We've been battling the school board all summer over the curriculum that I told you about. And that's been met with non-concern, disinterest, stonewalling, and even the disenfranchisement of parents that are trying to opt their kids out of this curriculum. So we're getting used to it. But 30 minutes before the meeting started, we were told the fix was in. Our superintendent had recommended masks for the children to reinstate the mask mandate, and our board has a long history of, quite frankly, being sycophantic. And when he recommends something, they're going to go along with it, and they voted along the lines that they usually do. There's 3 members that voted against, and they could be counted on, but the rest cannot be.
Right. I like the quote that I was reading about from Moms of Liberty. It said, none of us wanted this fight, but they picked one with our kids. It's understandable that parents would be frustrated, even angry, and justifiably outraged, because this is just one other offense in a long line of offenses that this school board has taken against parents and children in this district. Talk to us about this, because from what I think your numbers are growing down there in Tennessee.
We're approaching 3,000. I think we're around 2,500 right now. We're swamped with the requests, getting to them as fast as we can, but I anticipate 3,000 in our group by the end of the month.
Wow. Were you able to at least persuade the school board to hold off on making a determination about masking kids in schools? I mean, I know it's important that they say that to follow the science. There's not a lot of studies that support whatever science they claim to be following, though, to enforce something like that on school kids.
There was a motion to delay the vote by 3 weeks, and that was voted down.
They voted down. They won't even delay it.
No. But,
wow.
The situation, I've heard anywhere an estimate from 1,000 to 2,000 parents showed up on Tuesday. When I rolled into the parking lot, I couldn't believe it. My mouth fell open. I did a video of the whole line of parents, and it was 10-20 to 1 between unmasked to masked. And the clear majority was with the parents that want their children to just breathe free, or at least to have the choice. It's really about parental rights. And the school board is telling us that your parental rights stop at the classroom door. We actually had a school board member say as much. Your parental rights stop when your child enters the school, and that's not the case. It should be a partnership The schools and the parents should be a partnership in the education of their child and not to the exclusion of the parents. That trust has been so broken that it's going to take a long time to get it back. And over the summer, and even in the last week, parents have been gaslighted because Moms for Liberty has been battling the school board the entire summer over this curriculum. And we've been met with stonewalling. Wow. And parents, we're assisting parents in the opting out of the really objectionable texts. They go in to speak with the principal, and the principal says, I don't know what you're talking about, you're the only one. And then the week of orientation, you know, where the parents are taking their kids in to meet the teacher and walk the school property, suddenly kids are being asked about their pronouns, which parents' heads are beginning to spin. When did that become school policy? And then, but then they're like, well, at least my child can breathe free, because in the orientation week, more than 90% of the people were without masks. But literally at the 11th hour, Friday of last week, they called for a special session. We know what that's about. It's about masks. So parents, without even the first full week of school, even the first full day of school under their belt, they're already stressed and pushed to the limit.
Wow. I feel for parents in that county. We're talking with Robin Steenman. I know you're short on time today, and I appreciate you joining us. Last quick question for you. I would imagine that this energy that has, now your numbers are growing to 3,000. I would imagine that this energy, you're going to have you have a good bench of maybe future school board members. Do you have plans to go forward and basically take over the school board? And we did that in my town. I've seen a lot of other school districts they're doing the exact same thing. Where is Williamson County on this?
We anticipate a turnover of the school board. We have all the even seats up in August of 2022, and Moms for Liberty is not a political organization, but the parents they're ready. They're going to take it on, and we've been taking notes on South Lake.
Well, it's good to see, and I'm so glad. It was good to see so many people turn out for this, and kudos to you all, because parents have every right to be outraged about what's happening to their children. It's their children and the stuff that's being presented to them in the classroom under the guise of education. And if you can't get outraged about this, you have to ask parents, what are you saving your energy for? You're doing great work down there, Robin. Robin Steenman, Moms for Liberty in Williamson County, Tennessee. Thanks so much for joining us.
Bye.
All right, folks, the 10th Circuit rules that Colorado can compel and censor another business owner, this time a web designer, against her will. Her name is Lori Smith, and she and her ADF attorney, that's Alliance for Defending Freedom, Jake Warner, they're going to join us next to talk about how apparently now the government owns your labor in Colorado. Keep it here. Have you heard that The First sends out a daily email newsletter? Each morning, The First gathers the day's news, best videos, must-see moments that everybody's talking about, everything you need to start your day. And if you're not signed up for The First email, you're missing out. Go to thefirsttv.com to sign up today. Can you be forced to create a website for a cause or an idea that you don't agree with or believe in? Well, in Colorado, apparently you can. Joining us now, and this is what is happening in Colorado. Web designer and creator of 303 Creative, which is the area code for Denver, Lori Smith, and her attorney, Jake Warner, who's with Alliance for Defending Freedom. Good to see you both. Lori and Jake, thank you so much. First off, I have to say, Lori, how much I admire your spunk in this, because I was talking to our producer Rachel about this before we got started, because Jack Phillips, with whom we've spoken with him before, he actually baked your wedding cake, as I understand it, and you saw what Colorado was doing to Jack Phillips, and so you basically, correct me if I'm at all wrong, dared them to come after you because you knew at some point they were going to anyway, so you might as well be proactive. Is that accurate?
Well, I did see how the state of Colorado was treating Jack. 10 years ago, I started my business, and several years after that, looking around at the treatment of Jack Phillips, it was clear, hey, maybe the state could do this to me as well, which is why I have filed this lawsuit against the state of Colorado.
Yeah. And Colorado's, their reasoning, and I'm going to talk to Jake about some of the legalities of this here in a moment. I mean, it almost seems like they're commandeering your labor. Do you feel, Lori, like your labor is your own? I mean, under these types of laws or rulings, I mean, who actually owns your labor?
Well, what's interesting, so I design one-of-a-kind wedding websites and graphics with my clients. My clients range from small business owners, entrepreneurs, nonprofit agencies, but each and every one of my clients, what I create for them is truly art. It's a collaboration between the two of us. We're working to create an art piece, really. And while I'm happy to work with all people, there are certain messages I'm unable to promote through my business, which is why I am challenging this law.
Right. I had asked Jack when he was on, I said, well, what if I asked you for a Halloween cake? And I went in and he said, well, and the same as you, he's, devoted in his beliefs, and he doesn't, people don't understand that. People of faith, it's not just, a Wednesday evening practice or a Sunday practice. I mean, it's your daily lifestyle. I mean, that's how you live. You are you are your faith. And when I was reading about your story, and when you make your websites, that's you. You are putting your time, your thought, your talent, your creativity into that. And it boggles my mind, and this is where I want to bring it over to Jake. It boggles my mind that the way that you read what Colorado is determining with these business owners is that they don't own their speech or their thought or their association or their work. And I'm just flummoxed as to how that can even be a standing at all. Jake, talk to me about this, because really that's ultimately how you all were going at this too.
It's a pretty radical idea. What's at stake in Lori's case is this: does the government have the power to force a creative professional to express a message that goes against their deepest convictions? And recently, the 10th Circuit said that Colorado had that power to force Lori to create custom websites celebrating ideas about marriage that she disagrees with. And that's wrong. That violates the First Amendment. But it's not just a freedom that Lori enjoys. This is an important principle for every American. The government shouldn't have the power, for example, to force a website designer who identifies as LGBT to promote websites with messages about marriage that goes against their beliefs. So this is a critical freedom that every American should care about, and we're hopeful that the U.S. Supreme Court is going to weigh in on Lori's case.
Yeah, and that would be a huge victory for business owners, because you're right. I mean, this, the door kind of swings both ways. Jake, I have one more question for you on the legal aspect of it. When the suit was filed with the Colorado Civil Rights Division and the Civil Rights Commission, it was, as I understand it, targeting a rule that really could be discriminatory, not just towards people of faith, but people who don't want their beliefs compromised. And the way that it was responded to was that, well, nothing has happened to her yet, basically, so she really can't complain about this. And then they wanted to turn around and then end up going after her anyway. I mean, give me the layman's terms of exactly how they responded when she realized that, oh wow, they're interpreting these rules as being discriminatory towards business owners, particularly if they're people of faith.
At this point, everyone knows how Colorado is interpreting this law. We've seen this for the past decade. Colorado has targeted Jack Phillips, trying to punish him twice for declining to create cakes with messages that go against his sincerely held religious beliefs. And Jack had to go all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court to vindicate his First Amendment freedoms the first time around. So what the state of Colorado has made clear is that people like Lori, creative professionals in the state, are not safe if they want to create art consistently with their deepest beliefs. And this is something that should be of concern to everyone in Colorado, and indeed every American across the country.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, because it is, Lori, this is artistic expression. This is an artistic creation. It's not as though it's just straight, manufacturing one thing after another. It's a very different type of work, not to belittle or demean in any way any other type, but this is, it's a creative industry. And there's a lot of thought, a lot of you that goes into your projects. Talk a little bit about that, because, it very much is, it's your expression.
Absolutely. So every one of I talked a little bit about the process before, and it's very similar to an artist who uses a paintbrush to paint on a canvas. I take that same approach. Every website, every graphic, every product I produce is a representation of me. And so it is deeply personal to me. And the process is not something that I take flippantly. It's an investment of my time and my resources and my talents, and I truly love it and enjoy it. And it is truly art. And I believe strongly that artists like myself should have the right to live and work freely, um, and be able to do that without punishment for from the government, regardless of what their beliefs are, whether they're the same as mine or different from mine.
Right, and you would like to be able to operate your business without fear of being targeted also, I would imagine, Lori.
Absolutely.
Oh, goodness. Jake, a question for you on this. Is it just me, or does it seem that there's a bunch of activists that are going around trying to find Christian business owners and then trying to find something to be offended over and then suing these business owners as a way to take a stand against people of faith? I mean, it seems awful to say it, but it seems like this is happening.
That's what we're seeing, is that government officials and activists around the country are weaponizing our legal system simply to punish people that they disagree with. And the case of Jack Phillips probably highlights that principle better than anything. You might remember Jack has an attorney who's coming after him. The attorney requested a custom pink and blue cake to celebrate a gender transition. But it wasn't the first time this attorney had called Jack. Back in 2012, the attorney had emailed Jack calling him a bigot and a hypocrite, and then had also asked Jack to create a custom cake depicting Satan smoking marijuana to correct the errors of Jack's thinking. So this is a big problem that we're seeing, and we need the Supreme Court to weigh in on this issue and say once and for all that the government doesn't have the power to force people to express messages that go against their core beliefs, because this is critical for the freedom of every American.
It is. And Jake, you don't lose your rights just because you engage in commerce, correct?
That's right. Christian business owners like Lori, they still get to live by their faith, even when they enter into the marketplace. And the Supreme Court made that clear in the Masterpiece Cake Shop decision. One of the things that the Colorado officials said in Jack's case was that he was no longer welcome in the marketplace. And that was evidence of hostility against Jack and his faith. That's what the Supreme Court said. And I'm hoping that people around the country are going to hear that message and say, like, look, just because we want to live by our faith doesn't mean that government can kick us out of the marketplace. And we need the Supreme Court to come in and make sure that people of faith have this freedom to express messages that are consistent with their faith.
Yeah, exactly. It boggles my mind. And Lori, this is going to be kind of a silly question, but it has to be asked considering the silliness with which people, like business owners like yourself, have been persecuted. Apparently, once again, there are no other web designers in the entire state of Colorado, just like there were no other bakers in the entire state of Colorado. It was just Jack Phillips, and it's just you, Lori, and 303 Creative. There is nobody else. I see a great business opportunity because I'm sure you're overwhelmed with all of the business in the state, right?
Yeah, I do keep busy.
But it is, but people always, if I don't want to do business with someone, I would just go to a different business. I would go to because this is what gets me, Lori, is that, and Jake too, is that if you're working with someone that you disagree with that much and you think that they would disagree with you, wouldn't you be worried about, the way your cake tasted or the way your website would turn out? Lori, I'll start with you on that.
Well, like I said before, I'm happy to work with all people, and I have worked with members of the LGBT community before as business owners. So again, it's not the individual. I'm willing to work with everybody. It's
what's being expressed.
Yes, it's the message that's being expressed, and there are other messages as well. But there are other options for people out there who might be a better fit.
Right, there you go. And last question, I'll hand it over to you, Jake. It's very easy to recognize that nuance. So why can't the courts do it that easily? I mean, you recognize that you can serve. I mean, she's served, LGBT customers, but then if it turns out that they want a specific message, like if they wanted a specific like gender reassignment or whatever website, I mean, that's her, she's the one who puts in the capital, she's the one who puts in the effort, it's her business, her expression. You think that we can understand that nuance. So what's the problem with the courts, and why are we still doing this again?
Well, the good news is that many courts are now recognizing this principle. ADF has represented 2 filmmakers, for example, in Minnesota, who challenged a very similar law in their state. And the 8th Circuit said that the state could not force the filmmakers to create custom films celebrating a view of marriage that goes against their beliefs. And then we've also represented a painter and calligrapher here in Arizona, all the way up to the Arizona Supreme Court. And they've recognized the same principle, that when you have someone who serves everyone but just can't express every message through their custom expression, the First Amendment protects that. And what we're seeing is, courts are starting to realize that. And indeed, we're seeing that in some photographer cases along the East Coast. But I think all this highlights is that the U.S. Supreme Court needs to weigh in on this issue. The good news is more courts are doing that, but we need the U.S. Supreme Court to affirm this right and protect the freedom of all Americans.
And hopefully they will do just that. We will be watching. Lori Smith with 303 Creative and Jake Warner with Alliance for Defending Freedom. Appreciate the work that you do. And Lori, appreciate the stand you're taking. ADF are great folks. Thank you. Thank you both so much. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, folks, we have more No Apologies coming up next. You know that very soon acknowledging the existence of gravity is going to be taboo. Just wait. We're always told to follow the science and believe the CDC and their pure, scientifically driven mission. But then this, they tweet, quote, "The rise in cases, vaccine hesitancy, and the increased risk of severe illness for pregnant people make vaccination against COVID-19 more urgent than ever." Read why. This is Rochelle Walensky. She is the head of the CDC. CDC director is her handle. These are the follow the science people. Pregnant people? Like what? What is pregnant people? You mean women? Speaking of which, do you remember when the sexist patriarchy came to cancel J.K. Rowling over this exact same thing? J.K. Rowling was responding to the phraseology from an article, People Who Menstruate. Here's her tweet. It read, this was a year ago, June 2020. Quote, "People who menstruate, I'm sure there used to be a word for those people. Someone help me out. Wumben, wimpund, woomand." Yeah. Activists have spent the last several years trying to erase women, and they got their first success replacing women in sports. And the impact of the political ideology that they're pushing is already having a disastrous impact on protections for and representations of women. Opening the doors to all dressing rooms, fitting rooms, locker rooms, women's spaces where women and girls feel most vulnerable, and then demanding that these spaces be shared with biological men who aren't required to produce any kind of evidence, any kind of medical certificate or doctor's note of gender reassignment surgery, hormone treatment, or any kind of therapy. Men who can identify as gender fluid and then change their identity at whatever their discretion is that day. It's already led to some big problems. I mean, we were remember when we were discussing the We Salon, the We Spa, and you had a young girl that was exposed to an older man who went into the women's part where women, or that's where they get dressed and that's where they change their clothes, that men have their own, and then they have a common area in the middle where fully clothed men and women can then congregate, and they can both be there. But in the We Spa case, it wasn't that. And in fact, that's when you saw that viral video of the woman taking the We Spa employees to task because of what had happened with a young girl when a grown man came into the women's section and exposed themselves. Now, in any other, era, that would have been an indecency charge. Something would have been done to protect the young girl who had every right to be there at that spa. She had every right to be there. But instead, the man is lifted up as a protected class because of how he chooses to identify on any given day. And because he's elevated in our republic, which is unconstitutional, as a protected class, he's more protected than the woman is. And so he's going to get preference. Have you heard about any charges or any kind of criminal investigation into what's going on there with it? Because apparently there are multiple reports, not just this girl and this woman. No, trans activists tell women to shut up while harassing them and bullying them with disgusting sexist slurs like TERF, which stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminists. It's a sexist slur. People who use sexist slurs are sexist. The irony is that these activists are actually creating more feminists with a stereotypical patriarchal abuse, but all logic and science are lost on them. Now, the CDC choosing to involve itself in a political issue, that's not science, it's activism. It's an activism that betrays the public and discredits their purpose. Government agencies that can't themselves follow the science damage their own credibility and have no business lecturing the public. The CDC needs to do its job. And if their employees want to be activists, They should do so outside of the public sector. People who are pregnant? No, don't affirm silliness. We follow the science, right? We don't embrace ridiculous, politically driven ideologies, because when you do, you discredit yourself. And the CDC has a credibility problem. And that's maybe one of the reasons why people don't listen to them, which is scary because they're a leading government health agency navigating a pandemic, and they just indicated that they'll bend to politics, which means they're not practicing science and instead are pushing agenda that's not health. So they discredited themselves. And shame on any scientists, by the way, who don't speak up, any medical professionals who don't speak up. A fictional writer about witches has more guts than the scientists at the CDC, apparently. And they wonder why they can't get people to get the vaccination. That does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Good night, and don't bend the knee.